Break, break, break. Get ready for some important news on this channel. Time now.
Hello, welcome to Task and Purpose First Squad. I'm Chris Cappy. I'm a former US Army infantryman, and it's my goal with this channel to bring you a kind of ground level, average insight into what it's like to be in the military and some military topics. So today's episode is going to be about the Russian possible invasion of the Ukraine. Real quick, before we get started, subscribe so that we can see each other again, and hit the like button because that helps tell YouTube that you like the video and you think more people should see it, and it helps promote our content. If you haven't noticed, for the past few days, Russia's been amassing tremendous amount of troops along their border and the border of Crimea, which I'm sure is a ton of fun for the soldiers who all have to ride by train and really crappy military convoys, probably from Moscow all the way to Crimea. Imagine that, you're in the back of some logistics truck for 12 hours just driving. In this video, we're gonna briefly go over the history of what's been going on with this conflict. We're gonna talk about a couple of articles, including the Janes.com analysis, and we're gonna talk about some of the types of equipment and weapons that Russia is sending to their border with the Ukraine right now. So what's at stake here is that Russia could possibly push NATO into a position where they have to start World War III, and we see a bunch of brigades of heavy US armored divisions rolling on the west side of Ukraine, all the way to the river in the middle of the country, and then you got Russia on the east side, and they're moving all the way to meet the NATO forces in the middle of the Ukraine, and World War III can start right there. Come on, comrades, what are you doing? That is a terrible accent, I never can do that right. So the first thing we're going to talk about real quickly is the history of what's going on here. In 2014, the then Prime Minister of Ukraine, basically, he stopped a deal from going through with the Europeans. Half of the Ukrainians want this deal to go through, where it would make Ukraine closer to Europe and the NATO allies, and then you got the other half of the Ukrainians who want to be closer to Russia and their influence. So when the Prime Minister denied this attempt to get closer to Europe, basically what happened was a civil war broke out. And it ended in Russia coming in and annexing Crimea, and you might remember there was a bunch of soldiers there that were like, no, I have no idea. I'm here on vacation. That is not a Russian accent either. So they claimed that they weren't Russian soldiers, that they were just a private military force, but really it was Putin trying to take back Crimea. So what happened was there was a war where about 13,000 people died, and since then it's been somewhat of a stalemate where the Ukrainian forces have stopped the Russians right at the Crimean border. So why is this different? What's new? What's happening now that Russia is escalating things and putting about 80,000 troops on their border? Part of it has to do with a water crisis that's been happening. So we'll read quickly from Emerging Europe, where they say a deepening water crisis in Crimea is putting severe strain on the Russian government's finances and increasing pressure on Moscow to deliver on their promise that they made when they illegally occupied the peninsula. For several months, cities in Russian-occupied Crimea have been rationing their water. Most of the region, authorities say, are only providing 6 hours of water a day, 3 in the morning, 3 in the night. I've heard now it's gone to even 2 hours each day. Crimea has always been an arid region with comparatively little rainfall and snowfall. The rivers there are significantly smaller now than before. What the Ukrainians have been doing since Crimea was annexed away from them is they've been tightening the valve on the water. They've been stopping people in Crimea from getting water because Russians have been moving there since 2014. There's a lot more soldiers stationed there, barracks, and they require water. But the problem is all of that water comes from a river that runs down right through the middle of Ukraine. And it's called the Dnieper River. It runs right through Kiev and all the way down to Crimea. So what the Ukrainians have been doing is stopping the Russians from getting that vital water that they need. So what Russia feels like is that they're in a position where they have to fight, because if they don't, the drought is gonna kill them. And we'll read more supporting this, but basically here's an article from Euromedian Press that says Vladimir Putin has played down the problems arising from water shortages in Russia-occupied Crimea, but they are so critical not only for sustaining the lives of the people there, but for agricultural and industrial development that Moscow has little choice but to put more pressure on Kiev to release water to Crimea. So what they're saying there is that this could possibly be a motivation for why is Russia doing this? Why are they escalating things when for the past 10 years, nothing really has been going on there? Real quick about the water. Right before I went to Iraq, I had a friend ask me, hey, how would you feel about dying for oil? How would that make you feel if you actually went to Iraq and you were killed and all it was for was oil? And what I said to them was kind of tongue in cheek. I said, are you kidding me? Of course I would die for oil. Oil is the most valuable thing in the world. Try getting in your car and going to work without oil. Try doing anything without oil. It's impossible. It's probably the only thing worth dying for. And obviously I'm kind of making a joke when I say that to him just to get him off my back. But I could see if you're a Russian soldier in Crimea, then what's more important than fighting for a resource? In this case, it's probably the only resource that's more valuable than oil. Water. Without water, there is no life. You could live without oil, sure. It'd be hard. My 2002 Toyota Camry, I wouldn't be able to run anymore, but I really couldn't even wake up without water. So I could understand why they would want to go to war over a resource. Here's the report from Janes.com, which is an amazing defense analyst website. And they say Russian ground troop units and Iskander ballistic missiles identified at Ukrainian border by Janes. Janes has identified an influx of Central Military District troops from the 74th and 35th Motorized Brigades. A staging area has been established at a training ground south of Varenzia City equipped with a P-26 redundant U.S. long-range telecommunications complexes and a field hospital. The P-2060T is a long-range Army-level communication system that is not used at the battalion or the brigade level. It is indicative of the scale of the deployment. This part is interesting. It's important because it shows us how Janes does their work. They're able to tell how big this deployment is going to be based on reverse engineering some of the equipment that they see. If they see this big military telecommunications system, they're able to work backwards and say, okay, that communication system only really supports brigade and bigger sized elements. It's not there to support 2 squads. So they're able to tell, okay, this is gonna be big. There are gonna be a lot of Russian soldiers here. Because it's so hard to see how many soldiers there are, they're not gonna be out doing formation for the satellites to take pictures of them. This is how Janes is able to make a guess that there might be 40 to 80,000 soldiers. The Russian Ministry of Defense has belatedly labeled them as a control check exercise for the Southern Military District in Black Sea. I love this. I love how Russia claims when they're somewhere they're not supposed to be or doing something they're not supposed to be doing, they claim that it's a training exercise or that it's just soldiers that are on vacation. They're not officially sanctioned to be there. I'm sure the US does the same thing. I'm not talking about the US right now. Current indicators suggest it is unlikely the forces deployed to the border are in an offensive posture, but this could change if Russia continues to move forces to the Ukrainian border. Janes has identified the movement of Army air defense systems into the Voronezh region, which has not been observed with prior movements. While there is a strategic air defense unit based in Crimea, there had been no clear indications that tactical air defense assets were being transported to match the armored forces that had been deployed prior to this. So what they're saying here is they're able to tell if an Army unit force is preparing to do an offensive action. And you wonder, how are they able to tell that? It's not like they have the communications. They can't tell what the direct orders are. They don't have access to that. But what they do have is the knowledge that if you're going to invade a country, there's certain things that you need. You can't just invade the Ukraine without a couple of key pieces of assets. In this case, those assets are air defense systems, mobile air defense systems. Without that tactical capability, you're not going to see swarms of tanks and BMP-3s moving through the Ukraine and advancing and assaulting. Armored movements can't move without air defense systems. It doesn't look like they're all in formation. All right, everybody get online. We're going to invade the Ukraine. Nope, those orders, it wouldn't be able to happen yet. They're not mustered. And by that, I don't mean the delicious condiment. They go on to say the true extent of the cross-military district deployments also remains to be seen. The latest footage of regional exercises from the Russian Ministry of Defense indicates at least elements of some units, such as the 74th motorized brigade are still in Siberia. Motorized brigades are made up of fast-moving infantry that would be necessary for an offensive. They pioneered the mechanized infantry idea because in the 1950s, the Western thoughts, the Western philosophy on infantry doctrine was that you got a battle taxi that could carry 13 soldiers. You just brought that taxi up to the front line, dropped those troops off, and then you cheesed it. You got out of there. You left the infantry there to fend for themselves. You created a vehicle that could keep pace with the armored units, drop off infantry, and then support the infantry as they did their anti-tank procedures. If you're a Russian soldier on the ground on the Ukrainian border, you're probably thinking that the Ukraine has been a part of Russia for years and years in the past. They have a strong history together. A lot of Ukrainians speak Russian. So if you're a soldier there, you're probably being told by your commanders that the Ukrainian interests align with Russian interests, and that if the Ukrainian government fell and became a part of NATO, then it would be a huge problem for Russia because they'd have NATO influence and equipment in a country that borders Russia. It would be like if Russia made a pact with Mexico or Canada and suddenly the US was surrounded by a bunch of Russian troops doing exercises there. That's what is going through the mind of a Russian soldier on the ground. They're also worried about the water supply that the Ukrainians are stopping them from having. If you're a Ukrainian soldier, on the other side of the argument, on the ground, you're probably seeing all the prosperity of the West and hoping to be a part of that. And you want to, basically, they want protection from one side or the other, so they're placing a bet as to which side is going to be there for them. Is NATO going to protect them from a Russian invasion? Or do they feel like the Russians are going to treat them better? Russia has kind of a spotty record in the Ukraine. There is some bad blood there. A lot of people say that Stalin used the Ukrainians to fuel his war machine to defeat the Germans. So if you're a Russian soldier, you probably think that you're coming from a country that has, in their history, they defeated Nazi Germany. The Russian soldiers are the ones that threw all the bodies and all the resources at the German advance, and they stopped it. And they haven't really probably ever gotten that credit that they might deserve. So they're looking at all these countries that fell when the Soviet Union fell, and they lost these countries like Latvia, Lithuania, and the Ukraine. They believe that they deserve to have that land. They believe that post-World War II, they haven't really gotten a fair shake of things. On the other side, Ukrainian troops feel like they're fighting for their home country. They feel as though they're fighting for their independence, and they don't want to be a part of what they think is an authoritarian government. They don't want Putin to rule over them. So you have these two soldiers on both sides, and they think that they're fighting for what's right. And when I was in Iraq, I could always kind of understand where the enemy was coming from. It's funny, I would talk to my buddy and I would say, you know, they're really cowards for what they do with the IEDs. And the enemy in Iraq always planting IEDs and running away and not standing up and fighting us in a fair fight. And my buddy said to me, he's like, you know, we don't really fight fair either. We have jets that fly 30,000 feet in the air and drop bombs on them, and a lot of times we don't stand up and fight them. You should respect your enemy in war and respect where they're coming from. And if you can't put yourself in their shoes, then how are you going to understand how to defeat them? This was something that all great generals, I think, have the ability to put themselves in the shoes of the enemy, because once they're able to understand what their incentive is, they're able to then use that as a weakness. They're able to probe those weaknesses. So something I want to do with this channel is kind of expand I like talking about and thinking about these subjects. And this is a great opportunity to learn more about what are these different countries thinking, how are these huge moving pieces coming into place, and what are some of the reasons that this is happening, and how are these tactics going to determine the future of the world. This is a really cool resource that one of you guys actually sent me in the comments section. That's how I found it. there's a website that does live updates for the situation on the ground in any conflict area. So we can see this is the Ukraine here, Crimea here. This is where a lot of the Russian soldiers are building up here. And it shows you live updates of where troop movements are happening. And you can just click it and then see live real-time updates as to what's going on the ground. Someone had the balls to videotape this Russian convoy on it's a train that is shipping. Here we see a bunch of logistical trucks that are moving on this railhead. So you got Jeeps, and then in a second, we're gonna see a bunch of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles that it's showing us live that these troops are being shipped into place. Here's the main battle tanks, about a company's worth, or at least 2 platoons of tanks that are moving in, and then these are the BMPs that support the tanks, because usually in Russian doctrine, they have the BMPs move alongside the tanks. So that's moving on the railhead down to here. And we can also see other equipment being convoyed in by ground. Just somebody on the ground saw this moving by and he uploads it. I don't know how you don't get in trouble for doing this in Russia, because you're showing where troop movements are happening. They're doing it, and it's live updates. You see video footage of here's a convoy going across a bridge of tanks, and it's being moved by rail from the south up to Crimea. We're seeing it happen. The massive movement of troops along the Ukraine, which some people are thinking could be Russia's getting into place, getting ready to invade the Ukraine. Other people say that this is just a test of President Biden. Basically, what happens when there's a changing of the guard is that your competition, your enemy, is going to try to poke and press. It's like a game of chess. They move a pawn here to see where you'll move your pawn. And that's what they did in Iraq. Basically, units would rotate in, so you'd have the 10th Mountain rotate in, and the 82nd would rotate out. And what happens there is the enemy, when a new unit comes into an area of operations, the enemy probes them just to see how they're gonna react, to gauge how the next year is gonna play out, because units are there for a year. So what happens is they'll maybe plant a dummy ID somewhere and gauge the reaction. Does the 10th Mountain act more aggressively? Are they gonna go in there and just take over? Are they gonna do a bunch of midnight raids and round everybody up? Are they gonna do a whole military operation, or are they gonna invest more money in counter IEDs? That's what they're looking to see, is the reaction of the unit. Is it going to be hard, aggressive, or is it gonna be more chill? And a lot of times you can tell what the tempo for the year is gonna be based on how that unit reacts, because each unit actually has some autonomy. It's actually one of the most interesting things about the US Army, is that each brigade has its autonomy to act how it sees fit, kind of. We're all working together, but they are going to be as aggressive as they think will work, or as not aggressive. But what I'm saying here is that the Russians might be probing President Biden to see how he's gonna react, to gauge if he's going to send a bunch of troops into the Ukraine, kind of to gauge how the next 4 years and his administration is going to react to pressure. So it might not be that Putin is definitely gonna do a invasion here. It might just be to see how aggressive the NATO response is gonna be. One other thing I want to mention, I told this story a couple of videos ago, but this is actually more relevant here. When I got back from Iraq, my unit got mobilized to go to Latvia to help train the Latvians to deploy to Afghanistan. And we had all of our strikers there, and we were doing training with them, learning their approaches, and they were learning our approaches. And one of the things that a lot of the local civilians asked me was they wanted to know, would the US military be there to protect Latvia in the case of Russian invading? And this was back in 2010, so Russians were close allies with the US at the time. This was before these people in Latvia, the citizens there, had been under Russian control in the past. We actually stayed at an old Soviet tank base. But what's interesting is they were worried about the Russian military. They were asking, would NATO protect them? And I was saying, you're asking a lower enlisted soldier. You're asking the wrong guy. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That doesn't stop me from being interested in these things. And the Ukrainian government right now has been asking for NATO. They've been asking me to be part of NATO for years. Latvia is a part of NATO. Estonia, Lithuania, the Baltic states, they got that. But the Ukrainians haven't gotten it yet. My guess is because if the US grants them to be a member of NATO, that causes a huge headache for them, because now if Russia were to invade again, like they did with Crimea, that would pull us into World War III. Everyone's trying to avoid that situation. And what people I think don't understand is that if we were to get pulled into a war, it wouldn't be by accident. It's not gonna be some accidental, all these Russian soldiers are amassing their troops on the border and then some Russian just fires off his AK and hits a Ukrainian and suddenly we're pulled into a World War III. That's not gonna happen. It's gonna require the directive that's passed down from Putin or the Ukrainians. They're gonna have to be following orders. An invasion of the Ukraine isn't gonna accidentally happen because there's tension there. It would have to be a direct military order. Hey, we're ready. We have this plan to invade and it's going to happen. They might use something as an excuse to do the invasion, but they're not gonna act on their own orders, because you're not gonna see one company drive their BMPs straight into the Ukraine with no support. It's gonna be an order. What I'm saying is it's not just gonna accidentally occur. We can sleep easy knowing that if World War III starts, it's because somebody really wanted that to happen. But what do I know? I'm just a former E4 with back problems. And I don't claim to be an expert on these subjects. I just find them fascinating. It's interesting to me. I like to research these topics and to learn about them. And I hope you guys like to learn about it with me. Leave comments letting me know, because you guys gave me that great comment about this resource, which has all these instant updates and sources. And it's really been helpful in making this video and understanding the situation happening there. So I like to learn, and I'm not trying to claim that I'm some kind of defense expert. I'm a military enthusiast, and it interests me to think about these topics from the point of view of a regular soldier that is on the ground during an instance like this. I think I've kind of covered all the aspects of this conflict that is starting to shape up, and I've said everything I think I want to say about it. Let me know if there's other topics that you'd like me to cover, and one of you guys recommended that we do this video. Let me know if you have other topics that you'd like to hear about.